Hi everyone, today I'm talking about my top 10 board games that came out in 2021. Now I understand there's quite a bit of ambiguity about when games are technically released because a lot of these games aren't available in English until like the year after, for example. But just for consistency's sake, I've used the Board Game Geek listings as the year of release. So these are all listed as 2021 games on Board Game Geek. So I did actually make a premature list right at the beginning of this year or the end of last year. But that is so far out of touch now, and a lot of those were like reprints and things, because a lot of the games that came out on like Essen and Gen Con last year aren't available until the following year. So I'm finally at a point now where I'm quite content that this is my definitive top 10 games. Maybe they will shuffle a few places up and down, as the years and months go by, but these are 10 really, really good games, in fact, brilliant games. That I'd highly advocate. Before I get started, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer here in the UK. And if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get on with the list. At number 10, I have Savannah Park, which I believe is one of the only survivors from the original list. Now this is actually a very accessible Kramer and Kiesling co-design where you are going to be placing a bunch of animals, I think there's 5 or 6 different types of animals, randomly on this big grid of hexes. And then basically as the game goes on a player's turn, you're going to select one of those animals, you're going to pick them up, or one of those tiles I should say, pick them up and move it to a different hex spot. All with the idea of trying to slide this puzzle around, trying to get all the groups of animals together, because at the end of the game, the biggest group of animals you have of a certain type is going to get multiplied by the number of drinking holes in that group. But some of these tiles have multiple animals on them, so therefore you can kind of cross-contaminate the animals and kind of create chains through each other, all with the idea of squeezing as many victory points as you can. On top of that, there are quite a few restrictions in terms of not being able to place single animals next to a single burning tree, or 2 animals next to the 2 burning trees, because at the end of the game, they'll basically be disappeared from the board if that is the case. But this is one of the coolest games in terms of like turn angst and frustration, because if you're at the mercy of somebody else and they choose a tile that you're not quite ready to be picked up and moved yet, then that can really kind of throw a spanner in the works and mess with your plans. So you'll never really be able to play this 100% optimally, but that is what makes the game fun. A game that's kind of surprising that it's not been released before 2021 because it does feel timeless and very clean design, but it has a real good tension to it and is a lot of fun. So that is Savannah Park at number 10. At number 9, I have Subastral, which is definitely the smallest game on this list in terms of the box size and footprint. This is a pretty simple set collection and drafting style game. However, there are a few tweaks and twists on this one that just take it to the next level, in my opinion. So essentially what you're doing on your turn is you're taking a card from your hand, you're placing on this matching spot on this on this row of cards essentially, and depending on the number you've played, it's going to show the numbers, basically the cards to the left of it, so the lower numbers, are going to be able to be drafted into your hand to play in the future, but the ones that are to the right of it, or the higher numbers, can be played into your scoring tableau. And essentially you're trying to collect all the different types of cards, because this works on a sliding scale. The more different types you get, the bigger points you're going to get. But you're also trying to collect the same types of cards, provided they are further along in the order that you've collected the cards previously, because basically there's 8 different types, and if the 8th type you've collected, you have multiple of it, each one is going to be worth 8 points. So the same works in like the first card you collect is only going to be worth 1 point. So it's kind of splitting those plates. I want multiples of the ones further along, but I still want to create more and more rows, because the more rows I get, the more points I'm going to get again. And just that small tweak on the drafting, in terms of making sure you constantly have a flow of cards into your hand, because it's so easy to be tempted just to keep playing them into your tableau to score more and more points. But you'll quickly find that your options have ran out and you'll have no flexibility or choices going forward. So I love it when there are simple games out there that just manage to just modernize things and make it feel more fresh and revamp traditional mechanisms. And I think Subastral is a great example of that. This for me is a true example of a great filler game, and one of the best of last year for sure. That is Subastral. At number 8, I have Cascadia, which is definitely one of the most popular games on this list. It seems everybody has played this game at this point. And this is actually a game that I was quite late to the party on because I did not back the original Kickstarter, and by the time the level of hype and buzz had built up around this game, it was sold out everywhere, so I didn't manage to get it played. But when I did, I was really pleasantly surprised about how well this game works. It's a nice, charming little puzzly game, and you're drafting tiles and tokens in pairs. So I love this kind of dual drafting system where you want to take the tiles in order to expand your little terrain and increase the woodland area, increase the the plains, all to get the most points or to increase your points. But when you draft these things, they're coming hand in hand with an animal token, and those animal tokens are going to be placed directly on top of those tiles. And it's this additional level of a puzzle to it where all these animals have certain restrictions and criteria that they need in order to score. Like, for example, all the fish need to be in a connected row, or all the all the birds want to be in isolation, that kind of thing. And you're all trying to puzzle this out to be as optimal as possible in order to score as many points as you can. And it just works for what it is. Definitely one of the most charming and nice games to introduce to people who aren't so embedded in the hobby. This is definitely going to open the floodgates to them and show what modern games are capable of without being overwhelming. So still good decisions here, very little rules overhead, and it's just a wonderfully put together game that I can certainly see why it blew up. At number 7, I have Golem. So Golem to me is like a mishmash of old and new Euro mechanisms. So the drafting mechanism in this game is very similar to a game called Grand Austria Hotel, which is one of my favourite games ever. However, this one does it in a different way through the use of marbles. So you're going to be dropping these marbles in this synagogue structure, which is going to randomise them all and put them all in these different columns, which is going to associate to a different action. And these actions, or the strength of these actions, is going to be determined by the number of marbles in that column. So it might say take X amount of knowledge tokens equal to the number of marbles in that column, which is a really cool mechanism. So it's like, do I want the rarer actions where there's not many marbles but they're going to be weaker, or do I want to go with the most plentiful action and take them stronger? So I love the way that works. And then you're going to be basically activating these golems to take different actions as well. Every round they're going to be moving a certain amount of spaces, and you have this pressure to keep your students up with them or risk losing victory points if you can't spend knowledge tokens. It's quite an involved game, a lot of moving parts, but if you want your heavier, crunchy Euro experience with a lot of synergies between the different aspects, tons of upgrades, all of which are inviting, then Golem is definitely a strong candidate for that heavier type of Euro. And it's nice to know that designers like Simone Luciani, Virginia Gili, masters of their craft, are still putting out great games, and Golem is another example. So that is Golem at number 7. At number 6, I have Witchstone by Dr. Rainer Knizia. So this one is like a mishmash of mini games, but it's all held together through this really cool cauldron system where you have a bunch of these action tiles and you're placing them into your cauldron. And they're going to show the actions you can take. The actions in their own right are all very simple, such as going around this rondel and collecting points tokens, or travelling around this kind of crystal ball, visiting different cities and things, trying to get objectives completed, and building routes as you go, going up this wand to get different scoring criteria. Very simple mini games, but the way they're held together with that cauldron is awesome, because the more you place these tiles and match these symbols up, the action points start to compound on each other and get stronger and stronger. And eventually you'll be chaining a ton of actions together and just getting so much done on your turn. So if you want that kind of engine building and combo style of gameplay, then Witchstone is fantastic for that. It feels like you get more and more done. It has a great crescendo. Everything feels good. There's different strategies you can try, very easy to explain, and it's just Knizia doing what he does best, making pretty thinky games in very simple frameworks. And it's nice to know that Knizia is going back to making more involved games rather than just rehashing his older designs. So yeah, this is a co-design, but it's definitely got a lot of the Knizia DNA in it through that tile placement and other little mechanisms that he uses. But yeah, this is such a solid game and was a big hit for me. So that is Witchstone at number 6. At number 5, I have Brazil Imperial, which is a Eurified 4X game. So basically you are trying to build your little empire out. You're going to start with bare minimum and you're going to build more buildings, which is going to increase the resources you have. You're going to use those resources to build other buildings and get upgrades for your personal player board, which works in almost like a scythe fashion, where you've got basic actions, and as the game goes on, you can buy these manufactured goods, slide them to the bottom of the actions, and make so that all those actions improve to make you a lot more efficient. I love the buffet of options in this game. Everything feels inviting. There's a great time pressure into it because at the beginning of the game, everybody is going to get these 3 era cards with the objectives they need to complete to end the game. But you need to make sure you're kind of keeping up with the other players, or of course risk falling behind and not gaining the points you need by the time that game end triggers. I love the efficiency puzzle of this game because you do not want to be wasting any effort in terms of taking actions. But that being said, the actions do resolve very quickly. So despite being quite an involved game with lots to think about, there's not much downtime at all. It flows very nicely. And that being said, for a Euro 4X style game, that's for me was a huge triumph, because I've normally found with these style of games, they tend to get bogged down in just speed bumps and things that just stop it from progressing as much or as quick as I would have liked. But it seems to me that all the upgrades and things you can get in this game just make the game push along with a good momentum. So the fact that you can get this played in about 90 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, for me is very, very impressive, and has all the kind of trimmings of a 4X game that I would have liked. Even the combat in this game is well done because it's not so destructive, and you can't just go and demolish other people's stuff. You just simply park your military units on top of it, and while you're on top of it, it's yours. And I love the way that worked. So yeah, tons going on here, and the way it all pulled together for me was a huge success. So very happy with how Brazil Imperial turned out. At number 4, I have Mille Fiori by Reiner Knizia, so the second game by Knizia on this list. And with the first game, Witchstone, we were talking about combos and that satisfying, amplifying of actions. Mille Fiori takes that to the whole next level. So this one, much like Witchstone as well, this one has a bunch of mini games, and the way this is all held together is through a drafting system. So that's traditional pass and draft, where you have a hand of cards, you're going to pick the action you want and move it along. And each of these cards is going to relate to a different mini-game on the map, such as trying to connect all your pieces together in a chain, and trying to build pyramids with your pieces, and even just trying to get all your pieces in a row, and every kind of piece in an unbroken row is going to keep on compounding on the previous score. I love the way that works. And one of the key decisions in this game is whether you want to keep on building on your scores or try to cut other people off. So that level of interaction here really does shine through for me. Everything feels inviting. I love the levels of combos you can do here, because sometimes you'll pull off something on one mini game which will give you another action, which will give you another card draft, which you can do another game. That might let you have another partake in another action, and so on. So I love the way you can chain things together here. Definitely one of the most satisfying games out there. It feels like a true point salad, I suppose, always getting more and more points, and it's definitely just a bunch of fun. That's what I could describe it as. Plays in about 45 minutes. Cool decisions from start to finish, and it's an absolute blast to play. So that is Mille Fiori at number 4. At number 3, I have Boon Lake by Alexander Pfister. Now, Boon Lake actually does take a lot of the tried and tested things that he's known for in his games, such as that kind of player-driven tempo. In this one, you are sailing down this lake, getting different bonuses as you go. When you get to a certain checkpoint, halfway through the game, you're going to reset and go through the whole thing again. Loads of card play in this one as you're trying to constantly build up this engine, making yourself more and more efficient as you go. But the things I really loved about this game were, number one, the main action system, how you actually resolve your actions, as you're going to have this kind of stack of these action strips, and you're going to draft which one you want, and that is going to show the actions you can take, but it's also going to give everybody else an action. So you're constantly engaged in this game, and even when it's not your turn, you're still invested in what other people are selecting. But kind of the longer people neglect actions, they'll start to filter to the top, which means you can sail faster down river and take the bonuses that you really want. Or if you want to completely go back to back on an action, then you're actually going to suffer negative points. And I always love that kind of incentive building mechanism, where the longer you leave things, the better they get, and this one does it really well. The rest of the game almost feels like a Terra Mystica-esque thing, as you're constantly trying to upgrade things from your player board, erect buildings and towns and even like cattle enclosements onto the board. And as you do, you are revealing and uncovering income on your player boards. When it gets to a certain phase in the game, everything you have on the board is going to give you income, money and points and so on. So it has a lot of the Euro things that I tend to love, always upgrades. And it's got these cool little levers as well that you can pull to give you little bonuses. And it's just a ton of things you can do. You can build some very cool engines as all the cards and things synergize with each other. And it's just Alexander Pfister doing what he does best. Hence why it ranks so highly. So that is Boon Lake at number 3. At number 2, I have Messina 1347, which is a Vladimir Suki co-design. And I must admit, of recent years, every single game Suki has been bringing out has been a home run for me. His games just really gel with my personal taste. Now, Messina 1347, I suppose you could call it a worker movement game, as you have this huge grid of modular hexes, all with different actions you can take on them. And each turn is going to consist of moving your meeple from hex to hex. You have a limited amount of movement, but you can spend resources to move further if you want to. You're going to be collecting resources. You're going to be collecting these fire tokens, which means you can burn off play cubes on the map. If you don't fight off these play cubes, you can end up acquiring them, which will kind of accrue negative points as the game goes on. And you're also trying to rescue these civilians and put them on your own personal player board, which can give you kind of cool little benefits as you move another token around. Now, the thing I really loved about this game was that when you end up acquiring the civilians and they've been infected by the plague cube, they actually go into quarantine, which would normally mean they're pretty unproductive for a few turns until they, sit there waiting to be safe, I suppose. And but something you can do is you can invest in giving them tasks to do. So while they're not being productive, they can actually sit there giving you resources, which I thought was quite a cool touch. Everything else just works great. You can unlock new meeples, you can get points in a ton of different ways, build up a little bit of an engine. It's just a real satisfying Euro and another one of Suki's games that's just digestible but crunchy. You can pull off great turns and combos, and it's just a brilliant game, to be honest. I'm really happy with this one, which I'm obviously ecstatic about. So that is Messina 1347 at number 2. And finally, at number 1, my favourite game of 2021 is Ark Nova. So yes, it is a bit of a predictable one. This game certainly did reach levels of hysteria in terms of its hype in the board game space, but I think it deserves it because it is that good. And that is even overcoming some things which would normally be red flags for me. I generally don't like a bunch of different kind of player powers and things on cards and every card doing different things. I generally don't like games that take as long as Ark Nova does. But for some reason, it seems to completely transcend that because of how well the game is put together. So I don't want to kind of drill it into you because you probably know all about this game. But this is a game where you're building a zoo. You're going to be building a zoo by placing these tiles on your player board, which are the enclosures for your animals. You're going to be drafting and playing cards of different animals. All the animals are unique. They work in different ways. They score points in different ways. You're trying to partake in these conservation projects. You can get like government grants. There's pretty much everything you can do relating to the zoo theme that you can do in this game. And I just love the diversity in terms of the strategies you can go down. I love the end game scoring mechanism as you're trying to marry your conservation points and your ticket sales together, which has this kind of system which works like Rajas of the Ganges, if you're familiar with that game. And I love that kind of sudden death feature where you want to be the first person to do that. Just every game is going to feel different in this one because of the huge stack of animals in it, and it's just logical. And I've not even talked about the main mechanism in the game, which is this kind of action selection system which uses this card row, and the longer you neglect an action, the stronger it's going to get, and when you trigger it, it's going to move back to the end of the row and start charging up again as you take actions. I love things like that, and in this one you can even upgrade them to get improved versions of those actions. So much going on here. If you like engine building, this one has so much going on, and it's just a really, really good game. And sometimes when games reach this level of hype, it's normally a bit of a deterrent for me, but I have no qualms at all. I'm just adding to it really, and advocating my stamp of approval on this game as well, because it is, for me, it's going to really stand the test of time, and it's going to be considered one of the greats. So that is Ark Nova at number 1. So there we have it. Those are my top 10 games of 2021. I thought it was a really strong year. Every year had a list of 10 games this strong, then I'd be more than happy with that. And a good diversity of games as well. You've got that really simple filler games like Sebastral or Savannah Park, up to your heavier, crunchier Euros such as Ark Nova and Golem. So yeah, still putting great games out there. And no, the future looks bright, I suppose. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.